Welcome once again to The Blueprint. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. Thank you once again for joining us because we do have new content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We are not stopping. We're not slowing down. We are providing this information because, of course, if you listen to the media, election speculation is top of mind. So with that, we ask that you like, subscribe, share this program, help us push back against the ever-moving liberal agenda, because there might be someone in your social media network that might be open to hearing this message, something they aren't getting from the mainstream media. This is your opportunity to help do that and ensure that Erin O'Toole is the next Prime Minister of Canada. Of course, as always, if you can't watch the program in its entirety right this second, you can download it later on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. You name it, it is out there. As I mentioned, election speculation, top of mind in the media. It always seems to be in the headlines. Justin Trudeau denies it, but he is certainly traveling the country spending your hard-earned money. And to talk about that, we have Mike Lake, a good friend of the show. He's coming back from Edmonton, Wetaskiwin, the Member of Parliament, also a broadcaster himself. He has a podcast. We'll talk about that a little later on. But Mike, thank you very much for coming back and joining us.
It's great to be here, Jamie. Always appreciate it.
Well, in the last election, you won, just to get this right, with the largest margin in Canadian history in terms of raw votes. 53,000 votes separated you between your competitor.
Yeah, it's we had a great team in the election. Of course, Alberta is a pretty conservative part of the world, and we were fortunate. We worked hard, and I think we received 63,000 votes, and our nearest competitor was around 10,000. And it's a different dynamic in this riding. It's the biggest constituency in the country by population right now, and even with that, the Liberals couldn't find a constituent to actually run in the election. They had to bring somebody from outside the riding to run in the election here. So got a team ready to go, and that team's working hard preparing for this next one whenever it might come. It seems like it's going to be sooner than later. So.
Well, I think despite that margin of victory, you and others, regardless of where they are in the country, we're all working hard because we don't take anything for granted. We know Canadians want to hear a clear message. We got, as a party, 5 top priorities we want to talk about. I'll get into them in just a second, but you know, your team's out there. You're ready to go if an election call is on the advice of the Prime Minister to the Governor General, which could come at any time. But the problem is we have the pandemic still upon us. We have, unfortunately, fires burning in many parts of the country that need to be dealt with, that need the attention of all levels of government. Or the Prime Minister is just looking for political opportunity that could benefit him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is zero reason that we should be in an election right now. We talk about the fact that we'll be ready. We don't take anything for granted and all of those things because we have to be. And I think volunteers understand that in a minority parliament that you've got to be ready. But the reality is, this is a situation that we shouldn't even be in right now. The pandemic has been a time when we've seen politicians from all sides trying to find some common ground. We haven't always been listened to or been part of the conversations, much as the government likes to use taglines like Team Canada approach and we're all in this together. The reality in Parliament is that hasn't been the case more often than not. But still, we're facing challenges. There are concerns about variants and where we go from here. And Canadians, I think, at this point in time, would like to see their government working together with the opposition parties to see the best outcomes for Canadians. And we're not seeing that right now. Instead, we're moving full steam ahead towards an election that the people that we're talking to on the ground, nobody really wants right now.
Yeah, I could agree with you more. What I'm hearing a lot too is a lot of similar themes, and I think we as a party, as the official opposition, hopefully the next government of the country, have really tapped into the 5 priorities. Of course, if you haven't, the viewers or listeners, it's securing jobs, securing accountability, securing mental health, securing our country, and securing Canada's economy, all of which has taken a huge hit. in this pandemic, and even before. Like, Mike, you're a great advocate for mental health, even before the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has really exasperated the situation. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so a few thoughts on that. When you take a look at the five priorities, they are all connected. Of course, securing the country, that one's front and center in terms of our approach to the pandemic and making sure we're ready for whatever it is that comes our way from a global standpoint down the road. But when you take a look at, and you reference the fact that I've done a lot of work on mental health, I've done a lot of work on autism and developmental disability. I have a son, Jaden, who's 25 now with autism, and I do a lot of work on international development and those kind of things that have to do with vulnerable people. When you take a look at those things, for people for whom healthcare, education, social services, that sort of safety net that we talk about in Canada, for people for whom those things are important, which I think is most Canadians, it's really important not only that we fund those things in the short term, but that we're also able to fund those things in the long term. And the big concern that I have right now when we take a look at Canada's fiscal situation is that we are going to be really challenged in those areas in the long term. And we only have to take a look back at a previous Trudeau government to provide us an example of that, because the Pierre Trudeau government ran deficits in 14 out of 15 years when they were in power. And there wasn't a need to run those deficits at that time. It was a big government, a big spending government. And as interest rates escalated and the government took a pretty tough positions on energy, and we all remember the national energy program out here in the West. It really had a debilitating effect on the economy, and it was really a generation later with the Martin Chrétien Liberals in the late 90s that we saw the impact of that, when they cut $35 billion from transfers to the provinces for healthcare, social services, and education. And I fear that we're going down that road again. And so, we talk about mental health being one of the five priorities, but really getting Canadians working has to be absolutely front of mind right now, and having some plan to get the budget back to balance so that we have that flexibility in our budgeting and ensure our long-term ability to fund the things that are important to Canadians is absolutely critical right now. And nobody in the Liberal government is talking about that.
Well, the Parliamentary Budget Officer came out with a bit of a report recently talking about the path that we're on. The current government, the path that they are taking us, doesn't see the budget being balanced for upwards of 20 to 30 years. That's absolutely incredible. Like, how can you continue to run the country on the credit card for that length of time and not even have a second thought about impacting how services are delivered, how the tax rates are set, how interest rates are going to impact our capability as a country to service that debt?
Absolutely. It's highly experimental. And I think you make some good points. And the challenge is Parliament should be sitting to have conversations like this, to discuss these types of things. We've gone a year and a half. I mean, remember that most of this Parliament, we didn't actually have Parliament sitting like it's supposed to. We had a glorified committee sitting in the main chamber at one point in time. But it hasn't been, it hasn't been the same setup that we've used over the years, over our history as a country, that enables us to get to the best end result in terms of debate, meaningful, passionate debate, disagreement, that sort of cut and thrust of Parliament that gets you to the result that you need. And we're suffering because of it. And there's an added challenge in that. I would say, having watched the media over time, I mean, it's fair to say, I think reasonably most Canadians would understand that our media in general over time has been more left-leaning, but it's a little bit disheartening to see the fact that the media aren't asking these same tough questions at all either. And so we need to have that forum to be able to do that. And instead, we're shutting down Parliament right now and going into an election campaign, which doesn't give that opportunity. Sure, it's an opportunity for parties to put forward their different visions, and I think that we have a strong plan moving forward. But Canadians are not well served with with the government robbing us of the chance to really heartily debate stuff in the House and ask these tough questions.
It seems that in that report that the government is really relying on the fact that interest rates will stay low for the foreseeable future. And if those interest rates go up, if there is a bump in the economy, we take a downturn, all the numbers that the government is projecting are thrown off majorly. And this will have a significant impact. Not only that, as you talked about, Mike, we are borrowing and printing money at an alarming rate right now. And not all of it is going to COVID relief. So obviously, in the budget, very little aside from the planned increase was going to actual healthcare, to long-term care, to healthcare, to you name it. We've seen a whole bunch of money just couched in that COVID language that has nothing to do with COVID. And that, I think, is the issue. The issue at hand is the Liberals are spending because they love to spend on the credit card. It'll be someone else's mess, but yet they couch it in the language of COVID.
You're right. It's a short-term electoral calculation. And I mean, certainly let's face it. I mean, any government that was in power at this point in time is going to be challenged fiscally. I mean, we went through with the global economic meltdown. We went through a situation when we were in government that we had to take measures that that we didn't think that we would ever have to take in terms of deficit spending. And so, it would have been challenging for anybody, but what's bothersome here is the complete disregard for the types of questions that you're asking. Pierre Poilievre has done some fantastic work, as most of your followers here would know, asking questions about these very things, about inflation rate and the cost of printing money and how that affects people on fixed incomes and so many different areas. We had the opportunity in the chamber one night to question Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, about interest rates. And what was really troubling isn't that there's different sort of views and philosophy around potential interest rate increases. It was the fact that every single question repeatedly, when repeatedly asked about, have you considered what happens if interest rates go up? Her answer completely ignored the question and shot back at, with comments about conservatives playing political games and those kind of things, and just completely ignored the question. But if you take a look back at the Pierre Trudeau example that I spoke of earlier, the 20% interest rates that we saw in the early 80s, I think August of 81, I think the interest rate was about 20%. They didn't just get there. In 10 years earlier, I think the interest rate was around 5% in August of 71. And by August of 76, I think it was, 11%. And then by August of 81, it was 20%. It seems like reasonable, prudent planning to consider these possibilities right now. And there's no sign that the government is actually doing that. It seems like, there's a never-ending pool of money just going out the door with no consideration of the long-term impact. And quite frankly, in that regard, the concerns my constituents have had pre-COVID are the same concerns that they have now.
Oh, absolutely. And as Pierre says, we need to get back into the paycheck economy. And that goes to another pillar, which is securing jobs, but also something that your province, Saskatchewan, have been dealing with too. It's the policies of this Liberal government that are shutting down expansion in our anchors of the economy, in oil and gas, in mining is hurting right now because of poor government policy. It isn't the market making these demand changes that are causing the industry to hurt. It is actual government policy domestically that is causing these real problems. And groups, and Pierre Poilievre has pointed this out, groups that, His Holiness Mark Carney is managing, the funds they're managing are investing in oil and gas. They're just not in Canada. They're just not in North America. They're elsewhere.
Yeah, no, it's a major challenge. And you talk about the market and whether the market's making decisions or companies are making decisions not to make these investments. Well, it is fair to say. So if you take a look at TransCanada and the decision to abandon the Energy East project back in, I think it was about 2017, might have been 16, but I think it was 17. You take a look at that, and the Liberals in question period would say, well, the company made a business decision to walk away. Well, of course they made that business decision. They had spent over $1 billion in a regulatory process. And then the Liberals changed the regulatory process as it was nearing completion. And the business made a decision that with that kind of uncertainty, we can't afford to invest another $1 billion in a regulatory process that we don't really know where it's going to go. So that's the type of environment, and that's the type of decisions forced when you have a government that, is so antagonistic to industry, antagonistic to investment. And we talked earlier about the vote totals in the constituency here in the last election campaign and support for our party here. But what people across the country have to recognize is there's a reason for that, for that discontent with the government, and it leads to even more discontent because there's such a disconnection between the things that are important here and what they see the government doing there. And there seems to be no real attempt on the part of the government to understand the positions here. And certainly, as you know, I mean, we make this argument all the time. We have a solid plan on the environment as a party that we're proud to put in the window and to discuss. But there's a balance to be had. And people in my part of the country and our part of the country just don't see any balance to the conversation at all. And you want to talk about something that just drives people crazy is the fact that while we're having this conversation, while we can't build a pipeline, particularly an east-west pipeline, we're bringing in over 600,000 barrels of oil into Atlantic Canada from countries like Nigeria and Algeria and Saudi Arabia. And I can assure you that oil is not subject to the same rigorous emissions standards as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. And that's just pure politics that leads to a result like that, as opposed to any evidence-based decision making. And that just drives people crazy out west.
Absolutely, considering we have massive reserves that we would just like to get to market to sell at a fair price. And
well, absolutely. And I'll point out, not only do we have massive reserves, but we have an industry in Canada more committed to clean development than any industry in the world. And that is completely discounted by this government.
So let's talk about another pillar, securing accountability. It kind of goes to the point you were just making with big government, big lobbyists making decisions far away from the people, far away from the actual impact on the ground. So we're talking about new corruption laws that we'd like to bring in. Of course, with this government, you've seen the WE scandal, the trip to Billionaire Island, SNC Lavalin, the list goes on and on and on. But it also goes to how we're actually creating an environment for private sector growth in this country to provide the free market choice, to allow an individual, a group of people to come up with an idea, put it together, come up with a product or a service that others want to buy freely with their own money. But when you go to the big government model, the big, huge corporation model, they have the lawyers and the lobbyists meet in Ottawa, talk to government officials, and in most cases, you get barriers to competition added because in a lot of cases, it'd be big companies, a new regulation, a new rule doesn't really affect them. But if you're starting out or going from small to medium, all these rules, all these regulations hurt your chances of succeeding. And that's not what we should be doing. We should be building things here in this country.
Oh, absolutely. The transparency and accountability that we talk about, clarity, predictability, those are things that are completely missing. And I think you make a really good point that it is virtually impossible to get something started unless you have a team of lawyers and advisors willing to wade through all of the red tape and paperwork. And, a strong regulatory regime is important, right? We want to make sure that we preserve the environment. We want to make sure that our kids and grandkids enjoy this beautiful country like we've had a chance to enjoy it. But it can there's a limit to that, and there can when you get multiple levels of government layering on regulation upon regulation upon regulation, eventually get to a point where just nothing can get done. And really smart people who have really fantastic ideas have no way to navigate the system. It becomes virtually impossible. And, you take a look at some of the problems that we've had in the past, or that, we take a look at the global meltdown in 2008, 2009, 2010. Really, when you take a look at, there's a lot of factors in that, but one of the factors that was critical was a system that was so confusing that only the people within that system I was going to say understood it, but even the people within the system didn't understand it. And you can get that way with, a regulatory system that's so burdensome that, nobody can navigate it.
And you know what the problem is, and I know we've gone way over time, but the problem with that, as you just mentioned, is that because of those roadblocks, and again, Pierre Poilievre, the gatekeeper economy, because of that, we don't know the impact of the people who just walk away and don't try something, that don't come up, don't bother following through with their idea or their product because it's just one roadblock after another. And it's just easier at sometimes just to put up your hands and walk away. And that's something we don't want to happen, but that's something that is happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it happens in so many different areas. And in our part of the world, we've got no shortage of examples of companies that have, pulled up stakes and moved somewhere else, or retired early, or not moved forward with their business that they want to move forward in. But there's other areas where this has impact. I think about employment for people with disabilities, right, or developmental disabilities or other disabilities, and oftentimes the biggest impediment to moving forward is just what's perceived as risk, just the challenges around those types of things that don't really have to do with companies wanting to hire people and people being willing to work. It's more of a, it's a red tape that gets in the way, and potential liability and lack of clarity that get in the way of these things. So there's just so many areas where these are challenges, and we just need to do better. And I love the fact that we're setting a big goal, a million new jobs. I think it's something that we can do. I think this is the conversation. This is going to be absolutely central to the upcoming campaign.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that the evidence has shown us that when the government gets out of the way, the economy will create jobs. The market will provide. You'll see massive development, massive manufacturing. You will see these jobs come back. We just need to get out of the way and start to streamline some of these application process, the regulatory regimes that are in place. And I think we're going to do that. We are way over time, Mike. This is a great conversation. I don't want to let you go, but I do know you have other things on today. Maybe you can quickly talk about your podcast, which has got great attention from a whole bunch of traditional media. Just how you're bringing people together and the conversations that are taking place.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's not actually a podcast. It's not broadcast. It's a Zoom happy hour that we put together. We have one coming up today. We do them about 3 times a week, where we just bring 9 or 10 people together for 90 minutes from across the political spectrum, and have conversations about whatever anybody wants to talk about. And it's one of those things that as a member of parliament for 15 years, you get a chance to meet a lot of really great people who are doing great things. And I love to introduce people to each other. And so we found that rather than sending emails to 2 people to connect them, which we all do when we meet great people, and we think, oh, there's someone that we can connect with, how much better would it be if we brought 9 of them together to have a conversation? And it's been fantastic. And now we don't publicly broadcast those meetings. It's kind of a safe space to have a conversation, and everybody trusts that space. But what we have seen is that people have started to write about it with permission, and we've done a couple of mini versions on other people's podcasts, and so it does seem to be having some traction. And it's one of those things that we're just encouraging people to, within their own worlds. One of the things we've learned during this campaign this pandemic is that we've got this incredible virtual tool, whatever platform it is that people use, and you can reach people from across the world. And from a mental health standpoint, we need connection. We need to be meaningfully connected, and we've got the tools now to do that in ways that we haven't before. So it's been hugely successful. We are trying to figure out where we go with it now, because it's been successful sort of on a private level, but I do think that there's room for us to do something a little bit more publicly. And it's always nice though to come on a podcast like yours that has a following, and people get a chance to hear about it. But for those that are following, just highly encourage you to reach out within your own networks. And people are longing for that connection right now, and that meaningful conversation in a little bit more of a safe space where you can brainstorm and throw ideas out there, and they're not going to be tied to you on social media for the rest of your life. That's something that we're lacking right now, and I think it's we're less off as a society because of that.
I couldn't agree with you more. Mike Lake, thank you so much for coming on the program and joining us. I really appreciate it.
It's anytime, Jamie. I love that you do this. I love the opportunity to have the conversation, and best of luck if I don't see you in person in the next few weeks. We'll understand where everybody's at.
Likewise, Mike Lake, a member of Parliament for Edmonton, Wetaskiwin. We do appreciate his time. Good friend of the show. We do appreciate him coming on. We had a great conversation. And because of that, we ask that you like, subscribe, comment, share this program. Help us push back against that ever-moving liberal agenda. Again, if you can't watch the whole thing now, please download it. Listen to it later on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. We know there is someone in your social media network that might be open to hearing this message. Please do that. We would appreciate that, because we want to ensure that Erin O'Toole is the next Prime Minister of Canada and Justin Trudeau has his last term in office. Once again, new content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be back next week. We appreciate your support. As always, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.